Welcome to the Mobile Hunter Podcast. My name is Rick Cates. I'm your host this evening. And tonight we are back with another episode of Psyche of a Hunter. And my guest tonight is a guy I've been wanting to get on here for a little while now. I feel like every time we have a podcast that you're involved in, I either miss it or I got something going on. But I'd like to introduce you all to Cory Godar. How's it going, Cory?
Rick, I'm doing well, man. Very excited. I think this topic here tonight is a very slept on and very important aspect of becoming a good bow hunter. So I think it's a cool thing you guys are doing, and honestly, very honored to be a part of it. It's kind of, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing to be asked to be on this one. It's like, what did you have wrong with you to be on the Psyche of the Hunter podcast? But no, I'm very excited, man. Very excited.
I had Jacob Emery on here last year, and he goes, he's like, man, he goes, I'm real stoked you asked me, but he goes, I got to talk about deer that I missed, and I don't like doing that. but yeah, like that's the purpose of this podcast is to kind of get people a little bit more in tune with that side and understanding themselves as a hunter overall through experiences. And you've had one of the cooler ones over the past couple of years, but we'll get to that here in just a little while. So I'd like for you, if you could, kind of tell our audience who you are, what how you grew up in the outdoors, like how did Cory get from point A to point B with his outdoor life?
Yeah, absolutely. I would traditionally say this is not a traditional way to get into the outdoors, but it does seem, in my opinion, things are changing a lot. I did not grow up in the country. I grew up in the suburbs, and honestly, I used to laugh hearing guys defend themselves that they grew up in the suburbs and now they're into bow hunting, as if there was something wrong with that. But I grew up in the suburbs and started suburban hunting. My dad hunted a little bit. I had an uncle that was really into it, and kind of got bit by the bug. My uncle shot a really good deer. I got to kind of watch all that unfold. And I had been shooting a bow since I was very little. My dad had got me one, since I was probably 5 or 6, and did that for a long time until I was big enough to carry his climber around. He gave me his climber, and my dad kind of, at the time I took his climber, he kind of retired from bow hunting. But he still loves it. He loves to talk to me about it. He loves to support it, but just doesn't do it, and that's fine. But my uncle does it a lot, and so he was kind of my gateway into this whole thing. And mentality wise, like in the beginning, I was a little spoiled because I had watched him shoot such a big deer, and I started suburban hunting on small tracts of land over bait, and had a lot and early due to the bait. And that really slightly skewed my perspective of success in the deer woods, and spent a lot of time kind of reminiscing on that after, I shot a couple opening day bucks, and, I was kind of like, man, I'm killing some decent deer. But I didn't feel like I was hunting. I didn't feel like I was learning. And there's anything wrong with suburban hunting. There's a lot of awesome ways to do that. And it takes its own tactful approach in many ways, much different than big land or big woods hunting. But I was just ready to branch out and try something new. And my uncle had bought some land, and we had hunted that, and, I'd go out there with him for the rut, started doing that in high school. And, that was fun, but like we'd sit the same spots over and over every year. We went for 1 week, and you go out, you just sit and wait and hope and pray that, you got your opportunity. And I enjoyed that. It was major eye-opening, taught me a lot about land management and all that. But, soon after that, like when I was in college, I wanted to start exploring. I wanted to find new ways to, figure out how to deer hunt. I wanted to go get my butt kicked and see new areas. And so I started the public land thing. And at the same time, I had actually listened to a podcast with Cody DeQuisto, like way back. And he talked about giving up on trail cameras. And I had not near enough experience at the time to be giving up on trail cameras. I was way too green. But for some reason, I thought, if I can give up on trail cameras, that's going to force me to walk around more, figure things out, and just, grind it out. So I spent a whole year hunting public, just no cameras and doing nothing but just pounding ground and throwing sits, and honestly just failing over and over and over. And that year was pretty much the turning point in my head that I realized this is truly something I love doing. And it kind of sounds crazy, but the endless pursuit and the chase and the going out there with a cocky mentality and getting brought back down to earth real quick, and then realizing you don't know near as much as you think you know, and there's a lot to learn, and realizing how much there is to learn. That's kind of what I fell in love with. And so started doing the diehard public land bow hunting thing. Did that for, I don't know, a couple of years, and ended up doing a YouTube channel with a couple buddies here in Cincinnati, and just had a lot of fun with it. Similar thing to what you guys are doing. And, we were just hunting deer, filming what we could, shooting the shit in the stand and having a good time. And had a couple of videos do all right, and got connected with Alex Chop at Latitude. And at the time I graduated college and started doing digital marketing, and went down that career path, but Latitude had just started. And at the time, Alex, Jake, and Kev were still working full-time jobs, doing it on the side for the first year. And they were growing, and Alex basically, we had kind of became friends through the whole thing, and decided, they were ready to hire marketing help. And I had been kind of helping them on the side just as a friend, do a couple little things, the website and whatnot. And so I interviewed for that, got the job, and right at that point, all three of them quit their job and went all in on Latitude. And it was the first employee there. And, just kind of went from doing hunting as a hobby to, now it was my life. So it's my career and my hobby, and, and it shaped a lot of my friends. And now here we are talking, Rick. So
yeah.
A lot of fun, but
yeah. I love, we were talking about this a little bit. You guys have the Grit series on your guys' YouTube channel, and one of my favorite lines that Alex does on the voiceover is we met this guy named Cory and told us our video content sucked. I laugh at it every time I hear it, and it gets at the heart of a lot of things. I think if any of you out there haven't gone and watched the series yet, pop on over to their YouTube channel and watch it. It's great. It's not just killing big bucks, which there are on there, but it's a lot of really showing that you gotta love certain aspects of bow hunting and certain aspects of hunting in general to capitalize on some serious stuff if you want to keep moving forward and learning. And that's that's a huge topic for us, specifically. And Josh is a lifelong learner, and I think that is a very good way of going through things. Because when you become a lifelong learner, you're always going to be trying to pick up little pieces of stuff along the way. So that kind of leads me into my next piece. You've been in the industry now for a handful of years. What is life in the industry like for somebody coming in to it, with kind of fresh eyes and doing some things versus what you may have had preconceived notions about previously?
Yeah, I mean, the hunting industry is a blast. It's everybody that's in the hunting industry works in the hunting industry because they love hunting. It's a passion for sure. Which, in general, everybody's pretty like-minded and shares a lot of similarities. And so it's built a lot of my friendships, surrounding yourself by people that you want to be surrounded by. And it's been great in my experience. And, coming into it, I didn't necessarily know what to expect. I did marketing in the travel space. And so it was totally a little kind of different from, selling saddles. And but I had a really good general understanding of digital marketing and branding and building a brand, and was very fortunate. Alex and I feel, have just really hit it off from a friendship perspective, but also a work perspective. We really kind of yin and yang complement each other. So there's really no idea that I could throw at Alex that he shoots down. He pretty much just pours gas in the fire most of the time, and we just kind of figure out a way to figure everything out, and it's worked really well. And that kind of bred the Grit series. As I got to meet these guys, all of them were diehard bow hunters, and we're talking about ways to build a brand. I'm like, guys, like all of us love to do this. Like it's the biggest passion we have. It's the reason we're all doing it. I mean, Kev quit a job at Microsoft to go run a saddle company. Not common things that you hear. And so that kind of born the Grit series. It was an idea we had early on to showcase kind of what Latitude is. How do these products come about? Like, and it comes about from guys like you and I that are diehard bow hunters and need gear they can depend on when they're traveling across the country on a 10-day hunt on some land they've never stepped foot on, and they're grinding it out day in and night. And that kind of it's proof, it's social proof of what we're making and what we want the brand to be. So that kind of stemmed from all that, but on top of that, it's just a lot of fun. So we get to run around and hunt with our buddies and make memories, and it's awesome, man. Awesome.
Well, I'd like to roll into kind of the main reason I've got you on here. And for those of you, if this is your first time tuning into it, the purpose of this series, Psyche of a Hunter, is to kind of understand certain aspects of yourself as a hunter and allow for an open conversation with regards to parts of that. So if you go back and listen to episode 1, I had Chris and Josh on here. We kind of talked about what made you a better hunter by admitting something that wasn't good for yourself. In my second episode, we went through things with Derek Craig after him shooting a deer, and then it kind of coming full circle and finding the deer, and some things that he had to talk about to himself. Cory, yours is a bit different though, because we're not talking about missing a deer, which is normally like a key piece criteria here. But you had a pretty significant thing done, and I want to start there. So can you kind of I guess give everyone an idea of what happened, how it happened, and like the decisions that had to be made with regards to it?
Yeah. So, I mean, this goes back 2 years, and right before the 2023 bow hunting season, I had a major shoulder surgery. Got 7 anchors in my arm, had my bicep severed, reattached, and just, it was basically a major labrum repair. Nothing crazy. A lot of men over the age of 40 have some type of labrum tear, but I had just torn mine to the point I couldn't really necessarily use my arm anymore. So I put that off for as long as I could, realized, I could no longer draw my bow and still wanted to bow hunt. So I got shoulder surgery, and that was in the end of spring, early summer of 2023. And had a few months there to get ready for deer season, which, at the time I thought this was going to be the greatest deer season of my life, and I was willing to do anything to not miss it. It was, the first year of the Grit series at Latitude, I got to film it all, which was awesome. I learned some things, but this was the first year, I kind of got to hunt with the guys. So I was so jacked up to get to hunt, and I go through the surgery and realize my whole year might be coming to an end quickly. And so just went through a lot of rehab and focused on everything to get through that all summer, and ended up being able to draw a bow a week before Kentucky's opener. And so got that going, got my strength back somewhat, tons of rehab, and went down, hunted Kentucky's opener. We got our butts kicked, came back to Ohio, hunted all year. Hunted Indiana, and just honestly had no luck. Missed some deer, blew a bunch of opportunities, did a ton of scouting that summer, and failed and failed and failed and failed. And it was such a roller coaster of emotion, because I went from thinking the thing I love most was going to get taken away from me for a year, which really is not that big of a deal in the grand scheme of things. But then to fight through rehab, get back, get my strength back, be ready to hunt, on cloud nine that we made it, and then just the worst hunting season success-wise of my life. And which looking back, is the biggest blessing in disguise. I was forced to just work the hardest I've ever worked at it to get better. To keep grinding, get through it. I sat more than I ever sat, scouted more than I ever scouted, and learned a ton. And fast forward, we got through that bow season, and going into 2024 season, I was really struggling towards the end of the year. Literally the last sit of 2023, I missed a doe at 23 yards, and it was a chip shot, and I missed a foot under her stomach, and I was struggling, and I thought I had an astigmatism going on in my eye. And so I come back, 5-pin sight, full draw, and I'd put my top pin on her. Well, I had 2 top pins. And so instead of 1 green dot, I had 2 green dots, and my 5-pin had turned into a 10-pin. And, when you're at full draw on an animal trying to make an ethical shot, you don't want that going on. You're guessing what pin's your real pin. And so I realized right then I had, some type of vision problem going on. And, so getting into off season, hunting's done, chilling out for a while, getting the summer, and, really start picking my bow back up to start shooting again. And I still just can't make my pins out. And so go to the eye doctor. They're trying everything under the sun. Went to a different eye doctor, ended up a third eye doctor, which is like a true optometrist from my understanding. And turns out I had a...
Optometrist or ophthalmologist?
I don't know. You're the doctor here, Rick. But it was the true, like the higher level eye doctor from my understanding.
Ophthalmologist, yeah.
Yeah, not the one you just walk into and set an appointment to get contacts, So
yeah,
they tried everything under the sun to fit me for contacts, astigmatism, couldn't get it to work, and so they finally ended up scanning my corneas and testing me there, and I have some type of disease that has deteriorated my right cornea, and so it's basically become misshaped, and it's like a permanent astigmatism that's non-correctable by soft contacts or glasses, and so they kind of gave me 2 options. You can wear hard glass contacts that you get fitted to your eye. That's basically like a piece of glass over your eye. Or you can get a cadaver cornea surgically sewn into your eye to correct the shape of the cornea. And wasn't going to do either of those because it just sounded not great and didn't sound productive. So at that point, I had actually decided I was going to switch from shooting right-handed to left-handed to give me my good eye, able to see through the peep sight. But also my left shoulder that I had repaired at that point was kind of almost stronger because I had been doing so much rehab. It now has healed, had a full year. I'd spent, I had my rehab down to a science, and I felt strong. And so just did it, man. Just committed to it and switched to left-handed. I got a left-handed bow towards the end of summer, and a week to 2 weeks before going out to Nebraska to start the year off early season, set up a brand new Matthews, had it all dialed in, shot nearly every day, went out there, filled a public land tag in Nebraska, went down to Kansas straight from Nebraska, shot the biggest buck of my life on public, came home, sat 3 or 4 times in Ohio, shot my biggest public land buck in Ohio to date, and then went to Wisconsin, shot a public land buck in Wisconsin, and then came home and hung the bow up and had a baby. So that was it.
Hell of a year, man.
It was.
So like the I want people to understand this because it is I think it's hard for people to understand when you have a serious eye issue. If anybody who's listened to this knows that my right eye is completely reconstructed, and I had a hole in my retina that I'm pretty sure when I went to the ophthalmologist, he goes, "Did you take any blows to the head?" I was like, "Well, no." And he goes, your eye like looks as though like you've been hitting the head. He goes, "You're sure?" And I was like, I'm sitting there thinking, like, what the hell could I have done? And I was shooting. It was turkey season, and I shot and missed 2 different birds. But I was using those old nitro turkeys that kicked like mules in a 12 gauge. And when I shot, my head hit a tree, and didn't even think twice about it because I'm so focused on trying to kill the bird. And it completely screwed up my eye. So on the outside of my eye, I have what's called a scleral buckle. And when you go and you have like a doctor tells you like you have to have an eye procedure done, it's not like one of those things where it's like, oh, we're going to cut on your hand, we're going to cut on your leg or something like that. It's been my youngest kid is 6. I had this done with him when he was a baby. No, he wasn't even born yet. So it was pre him being born. And I just got my new set of contacts, and they have finally just now corrected my eyesight. And I mean, we're talking 6 years post where it's adjusted. So when you hear from them, like, let's, you have these 2 options for your eye, was it an immediate thought of, I've got to figure this out and I've got to start shooting left-handed? Or was it like, was there a real wrestling and kind of thought of what you were going to do here?
It was rather immediate. The reason being is the eye doctors around here, the guy he recommended to me was up at UC, the hospital downtown, and apparently it's a phenomenal eye doctor. And he was like a 2-month wait to get into. He deals with all kinds of, crazy, unique situations from people all around the world. And so even just that timeline alone, I realized, I'm pushing the limit with bow season. And honestly, the left-handed thing to me, I'm pretty much convinced my left eye is much better than my right eye at this point. Obviously, probably due to that issue. So I kind of was excited about it a little bit. I figured, it's kind of like an advantage. I'm going to be able to see better for the first time. And if I can just take the time to teach myself archery over, it should be an advantage. And it's kind of what it ended up being. I made the switch, got a left-handed bow as fast as I could, and ended up having a prime bow for the summer and shot the crap out of the thing. And I wasn't shooting long distances. I was just going down out my back door. I had a target up at, just like you would paper tuning a bow. I was shooting at 3 to 5 yards, and I would just do reps, and it was just building muscle memory. And then I'd go to the gym in the morning. I'd do my back exercises, my pull-ups. I literally had the cable machine where I was just basically learning how to draw, and every 2-3 days increasing the weight till I was, when I started shooting a left-handed bow, I built my left-handed, my surgical repaired shoulder up to the point I drew 65 pounds right out the gate. That was,
oh, wow. Okay.
Started at 65. And I was worried about that because I was only shooting 50 pounds right-handed after my surgery because my shoulder was so fresh. But it became muscle memory because I shot the bow hundreds of times left-handed at 3 to 4 yards, close my eyes, make sure my draw was good, line everything up and shoot, and got the muscle memory down. And then I started going and actually shooting at 3D courses and just getting reps under my belt. Got my bow sighted in, and I honestly felt great. I mean, I made some of the best shots. Every deer I shot this year died within eyesight.
Wow. So was there any large mental block for you when you're going through this and you're switching over to your left hand? Because I've talked to guys about this before, and a lot of people say, it's not as difficult as everyone thinks, and then they say, but like there's like one thing that is very hard for them to kind of dissuade their head from. So was there anything like that for you where you were doing good, but like there's still just like this mental piece that's not allowing you to move forward the way that you would like to?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. It was more subconscious than anything that, am I going to mess this up the first time a deer actually walks in front of me? Shooting a target, shooting an actual live animal is totally different. different experience. And so I shot as much as possible to get as comfortable as possible, but I definitely had a lot of second thoughts in the back of my head that, what's going to happen the first time a deer walks out in front of me. And that actually made my decision up on our first trip this year in Nebraska. I went out there with full intentions shooting a buck in Nebraska, got an opportunity. We blew it, just got winded and blew the whole thing out. And after that, I was like, man, I have to shoot a deer. I'm going to Kansas in 3 days, and I got the rest of the bow season ahead of me. I haven't killed anything. And so we went doe hunting, and, fortunate enough, had one come through at 20 yards and shot her. She died 50, 60 yards in the field edge right there in front of me. And it was a massive confidence boost because I did not feel necessarily as comfortable as I was hoping to when I picked the bow up to shoot her. It's just like your instinct kicks in that you've done something one way for so long in your life that, doing it completely backwards. But yeah, it was a big subconscious hurdle. I remember the first sit in Nebraska, I was hunting with Lane Hausner, and I set the tree up backwards for us. I set it up as if I was still right-handed. I
was just getting ready to ask that.
Right.
But
and
how different was that? Like, I mean, you work for a saddle company, so like, how different was that trying to shoot at like what was? I mean, it used to be your weak side, correct? So you're now shooting that way out of a tree. Did you do any practice like that prior to going out, like sitting in the saddle shooting, or is it just like we're going to see how this rolls?
I didn't necessarily have the time to practice out of the saddle. Definitely should have, but no, I shot a lot. I did not shoot out of the saddle. And so I think that's where hanging a set, I hung it backwards for sure. And that was a little weird, but I've really not had much of a problem shooting out of a saddle personally. I've done it for a while now that I feel pretty comfortable. It's kind of how I think my body has become accustomed to hunting, so I wasn't necessarily as worried about that. I already had understood, the concepts of good form out of a saddle versus on the ground, from doing it right-handed. So, I just kind of knew to do that. That being said, the doe we shot in Nebraska, we were in such a messed up tree that Lane actually was leaning back against a limb like it was a recliner with no platform. And I was on a horizontal limb with no platform. And we were just like tethered at the waist. So I basically was just standing upright, on a big tree branch, and shot the doe. And, so it was definitely a mental hurdle, but once I got one, I felt pretty good. So,
yeah. So then, I mean, you move on to Kansas, and if any of you haven't listened, episode 6 of the Wild Calling Wednesdays that we did with Jacob Sklinner, Cory went over his buck hunt there, and it's an absolute, just an insane story. But like, and I mean, if you've not seen pictures of the deer, like I encourage you to go and find them, because it's a freaking horse of a buck, like just absolutely. I mean, I can't say congrats enough on a deer like that, man.
No, I appreciate it. It's definitely a buck of a lifetime, I'm actually supposed to pick him up from the taxidermist tomorrow night. So
nice.
Super stoked. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, that deer, it was a milestone in my life. It's funny that the Psyche of a Hunter, I would say it took multiple life experiences for me that I did not know I was going through to prepare me to shoot that buck. Things I even think all the way back to high school sports coaches I had, I played sports like everybody in high school, and had a phenomenal lacrosse coach that had came, he, for lack of better words, was just a badass. He came from a program where he had actually won a state championship in Ohio. He played at Ohio State. He was a goalie, and he came to our high school to take our program to Division I for the first year. And him and I had hit it off, and he really changed my outlook on how to learn and be good at something. I had played sports like everybody and done the practices and all this, but he taught me how to basically operate at what I realized was a level nobody else was operating at. He taught us how to practice, how to learn something. And, we would have a pre-practice before the practice because there's only so many hours in the day that you were allowed to coach. And so, he'd have the captains and we'd go get practice started and we'd have a 30-minute, skill session before practice actually started. Then we'd have a post-practice. We all had to read a book. We had to memorize a quote every day before practice. Different member on the team had to be able to recite it at will, get texted out in the morning, all this crazy stuff that you would never expect for a high school program. But, he elevated us to a level that, was higher than I had ever tried to work towards. And I remember, I was like all in on this, and I thought it was the coolest thing in the world. I wanted to be the best lacrosse player in the world. And, I got to be the captain and all that jazz. And practice time had been switched. He sent an email out, something occurred in his life. He had to move practice up an hour. And I thought I was getting to practice an hour early, but I actually was getting there right on time. And I come strolling in, I'm like 10 minutes late to practice start, but I thought I was 50 minutes early. And he literally, the punishment, it was no questions asked. It wasn't, why are you late? It didn't matter. I was just late, black and white. And I had to run 52 laps around the field is what it ended up being. It was over 10 miles, like close to 12 miles, I believe. It was the entire practice, like a 3-hour period, never stopped running. We literally had a kid pass out from heat stroke, got taken away. Literally the ambulance came down on the field and
Jesus Christ.
It was madness. And, at the end he came up, we talked and, everything was good. But what I realized in that moment was whether you're right or whether you're doing something right, it doesn't mean it's always going to be fair. I had full intentions of getting practice on time that day, but the reality of the situation, I was not. And had to be punished for that. And that is the most true thing I've ever learned about bow hunting is no matter how much you prepare, no matter how much you shoot your bow, you scout, you look at the map, you figure out where the deer are. Sometimes it's just not fair. And, I learned that from him. And, I think mentally early on in bow hunting, there'd be times like, you're diehard shit. You got a buck on your camera in the summer. He's a giant. And you think you're going to kill him and you're so excited about it. And then the neighbor kills him. Or, it's just like, it doesn't feel right. Or somebody's in your spot, blows your heart up. And, that mentality of, sometimes even when you think you're doing everything right, it's just not going to shake out your way. He helped me shape that, I think. And I think that's really helped me keep a level head in the woods, so to speak. And, even evolving off of that, like there's another life experience. And, we had talked about, you and I talked about this before the podcast started. Alex Chop from Latitude has a quote at the end of the Grit series, hunting is important because it teaches you about life. And it's very true, but things in life also teach you how to be a better hunter. And that has really rang true in my head. And one person, his name's Chad Eisenagel. And Chad is that guy people talk about, like, podcast hosts are always like, we're trying to get the guy that's an absolute killer that nobody knows about. That's Chad. And Chad should be on every podcast under the sun, but he's older now and he's done doing it. But Chad ran a hunting show. And he was in Cincinnati, and he actually bought a house in the same neighborhood as my parents. And he was much younger than my parents, but kind of more in between our age and their age. And so growing up, I looked up to Chad. Like Chad would shoot his bow. I'd go over there, shoot my bow with Chad a little bit. He'd come out, throw snowballs at cars with us and all that stuff. I just thought he was the coolest dude in the world. And Chad shot a lot of big deer. But he also shot a lot of big elk. And so Chad lives in Cincinnati. He's been a part of, at the time when I talked to him about this, 9 public land bull elk kills. And he lives in Ohio. Wow. Just impressive stuff. But my first time ever going to elk hunting, I talked to Chad about it before we went, and he gave us a ton of advice. But the best advice he ever gave us was, if you're going to go backcountry elk hunting, you better clear your conscience. And you cannot go to the woods with baggage. If you go to the woods with something at work that's nagging you, something in your relationship that's nagging you, it's going to eat you alive. And
Yep.
elk hunting, especially backcountry hunting, travel hunting, when you're far away from home and you hit that day 2, day 3, day 4, and you're just mentally exhausted, pounding 10, 12 miles a day, it will bring out the worst in you. And it brings out, it'll ruin friendships. It's crazy. But Chad talked to me a lot about this before we went. And, I experienced it, and we went elk hunting, and it trained us. I mean, I went with my best friend, Thomas, and, we didn't fight, but we had our arguments in the woods, and, to the point where you're like, somebody would never expect to get to that point, but you're beaten to the ground. And I took that mentality back into whitetail hunting. And I think it rang true in that 2023 season. I thought, I had scouted like an ungodly amount before that deer season. I started, we're doing the content at Latitude. I was running around filming Jake Bush. We, I probably did, 150 miles of scouting with Jake Bush that spring. And, he taught me an ungodly amount of things. And, I felt the confidence I've never felt before going into the deer season, just got absolutely flattened. So getting to Kansas, like when we left for that trip, we went to Nebraska, drove straight from Nebraska to Kansas. It was going to be a 15-day marathon. And mentally, I'm pulling from all these things that look, sometimes shit happens to you. It's not fair, but you just got to figure out and get through it. And you also got to make sure you keep a clear conscience while doing it, because if you don't have a clear conscience, if you're leaving a travel hunt, it is going to ruin your hunt. And so did a lot of things to prepare for that. Had a lot of talks with my wife of just like, hey, making her understand how important chasing these goals was to me. And, once I could educate her on that and not just keep her in the dark and let her think I'm just going hunting again, I realized the more I could get her to understand how badly I wanted to do this, the more she was willing to work with me on how to get there. Yep. And, so we start communicating more, we start planning more. And that, that was critical. It eliminated that baggage in my mindset of feeling guilty, of leaving her at home, pregnant. And with our first child, she had just been through 2 miscarriages that we had, previous to that. And, this one stuck, and, we don't know what the hell is going to happen. It's her first kid, and she's worried to death at home. But she was a rock for me because we've had those convos. And so we got out to Kansas, and I just went balls to the wall as hard as I could frickin' scout. We started that in Nebraska, and, hit as many properties as possible and got to Kansas. And I think all of that in accumulation of keeping a level mindset through the 12-day marathon of basically what it was before I shot that deer. The knowledge I had gained through the experience of the previous seasons of getting my ass kicked is how I got there. So had I not gone through that, I don't think there's any way in hell I would have shot that deer.
No, I agree 100%. And you hit on a lot of pieces there that are super important. There's a quote, I'm going to sound super nerdy, but there's a quote from Star Trek where it's like, you can play the game right the entire time and you can still lose. And I've always thought of that as an allegory for bow hunting. You can do everything right. You can put yourself in the right tree. You can put yourself in the right wind. The deer can walk in a certain point, but they hear a twig snap. They see, something out of the corner of their eye. A coyote blows through or something. And it's like, is it fair? No, but that's part of it. And you're allowed to, the thing that I talk to people about in counseling is if you need to lick your wounds, do it, give yourself a time frame to do it, but then understand it's done after that point. Right. It's okay. It's okay to say man, that sucks. And that's not fair, whatever. And it's okay, but what are we going to do next? So you see this a lot, actually with tournament fishermen too. Guys who fish big dollar tournaments, redfish, walleye, except for those guys who cheated on Lake Erie, and bass fishermen, they're not boo-hooing if the fish aren't where they are. It's okay, we're moving on to the next thing. We're moving on to the next. They don't have time to sit there and say this isn't fair. It's what can I do to adjust it to make things better for myself? And a lot of people don't look at that life experience, and they'd rather stay mired in the situations that they're in, because that's what they're comfortable with.
Right.
And what you've described in each of these situations is the old, the statement that I use, kind of being comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think that that's a huge piece of being in the woods, specifically with like what you said with going out west. Um, you know, people don't. I like so I've never been out west on a hunt, but I mean I know damn sure and well, like if I've been on a week-long fishing trip or if I've been on a week-long hunting trip, like baggage from home weighs heavy. Specifically, like you got kids, wife's there, you call at the end of the night, like you find out like my youngest is a hellion. Like he love him to death, but like he turns into like a vampire like at 8:30 at night and wants to just like rampage through the house. And like it can be a really stressful thing. And if you go into the woods thinking, oh man, what kind of phone call am I going to get when I check in? You're not concentrating, you're not thinking, you're not going to be your best self. And I think a lot of people don't have those conversations with their spouse like you're talking about. And you want your significant other to kind of understand these things. Otherwise, one, you're not going to get to do it as much as you like to. Two, if there's no understanding of what you're doing, they're always going to be questioning it. And three, it doesn't settle anything in your mind. So I'm real happy that you kind of brought that up, and brought up the fact that you learned these over this is going to sound really goofy, a longitudinal life experience for yourself.
Yeah, it is. It's wild how it all ties together, at the end of the day. I do think there's certain mentalities play better to different hunting styles and different hunts, that out of state hunting mentality. It takes a lot of experience, but it also takes the mental side of, being prepared to go through hell to get there. And that took time for me as well. I mean, I learned a lot from Alex. My first real big, I had hunted out of state down in like Kentucky, but I live in Ohio, but my first time ever out of state, we went to Nebraska with the Latitude guys. And, I was going to properties, I'd scout a little bit, scout the next property, find some sign. I'd sit it that night, come back, sit it the next day, sit it that afternoon. All right, it's not working. Let's go scout another property. And, I just wasn't having success. And I was watching Alex at the same time, like literally basically bury himself into the ground. He just essentially was not sleeping, just grinding to oblivion, like 100-degree days. And, he's probably sleeping, he's getting up at 3 a.m., trying to hunt mornings, scouting in the middle of the day, hunting the evenings, getting back, trying to get dinner, dehydrated as hell, going to the gas station, living off of granola bars and Gatorades. And, and Alex lives off ice cream cones. But, I watched that. And then, I took that into my, he had success. He shot a phenomenal velvet deer out there. It was the first buck in the Grit series. It was awesome. And, fall of the next year, I spent all that time with Jake, and, Jake's hunted a ton and he knows as much as anybody. And I got to hunt out of state with him, and we just freaking grinded. And so I accumulated a lot of experience, but I paired it with that mentality. And going out of state this year, my basically game plan and mental state was I was not coming home without a deer. That was whether I was or not, in my brain, that wasn't an option. But secondly, like, there was nothing, I get all the time in the world to sleep in at home and be tired and all that jazz. Like there was just nothing that was going to stop. In Nebraska, Lane and I walked 20 pieces of public before we found where we were going to start hunting. And, that it felt like it was nuts, but we finally found the scrape and the sign and got into a block and blew the opportunity. And, that came back to well, we just drove 10, 12 hours, wasted 4 days of just walking endlessly and aimlessly to find this. And we blew the whole situation up, like, what do you do now? And it wasn't go in the corner, cry and pout about it. It was figure out the next solution. And so we did that, and we shot that doe, and that was great. But that we carried that mentality and learning experience into Kansas, and then, learned a few things to shoot that big deer. But, that out of state mentality, that like kill or be killed, there's nothing, it's a cool mindset in hunting to have. It's totally different in my mind from when I'm at home and I'm hunting my local ground or what I like to hunt nearby, which, mentally wise, like they're both the same thing and maybe they don't need to be too different, but, it's like playing a different game when you're at home scouting all throughout the year, running trail cameras, finding deer, picking out a buck to chase. And, that comes with its own mental challenges of, like you find a buck all summer, you're glassing him, you got trail cam pics of him, Chris's situation, he goes in, some guy's standing in a spot on opening day, or, you have him pinned, and, Ohio opens up the 28th, and a lot of guys talk about how deer shift as soon as that pressure initiates. Second, third, fourth day of October, they're on a different pattern, they're moving around. Like, you went from patterning something all year to now you lost it completely. What do you do? And, that, again, it just comes back to, you got to keep a level head, and you got to realize, all right, he's gone. Let's go find him. It's not, all right, I'm not going to hunt today, or I'm not going to scout today. It's go figure it out,
Well, exactly. And I like what you said. It's let's go find him. So that buck that Chris killed 2 years ago, that was, again, like the whole thing happened. Like, he has that situation happen, shoots, misses that buck, and his attempt to go find that buck led him to kill that much larger deer.
Right.
And it's not like these deer just like disappear. It's almost as though, like, when people don't see them, like the deer didn't, like, there's a chance they could have died. There's a chance they could have been shot, whatever. The reality of it is that, like, shift your focus, shift your idea of what is going to work, and try to move forward with it. We have this term in counseling called cognitive flexibility, and if you do not allow yourself to be cognitively flexible, you're not going to get real far in stuff. Typically we talk about this in terms of, like, if you meet somebody and you have a first impression and you have low cognitive flexibility, you're going to have that thought process about that person for the rest of the time that you work with them or you're around them. A lot of hunters have that same process where they're like, well, I guess that deer's gone, so I'm not going to do anything about it. You can do that, or you can see what's going to work now. Like, you have to switch things up in order to get better. And I think that there's something that's just so, like, it gets lost a lot of times. And I don't know if that is just due to, guys not wanting to kind of get out of their comfort zones and try something a little different for fear that they're going to miss a deer, doing what a deer normally does when they shoot one, or what it is.
I think it's emotion. Like out of state, if you're going somewhere you've never been, you don't have trail cameras, you got nothing to lose, When you're at home, guys are emotional about things they're passionate about. And if you're at home, you're running trail cameras, putting your hard-earned money into it, scouting, taking time away from your family to get in the woods, stressing your relationships and finding a big deer finally, and you're mentally in your head, like, it's all you can think about. Like, there becomes an emotional tie to that animal, whether we want it or not. And so when that scenario blows up in your face, it is a emotional experience, which requires a very level-headed thought process to overcome. Versus out of state, like you walk in, somebody's in your spot, it's not your spot. None of these are your spot. It's public land. It's whatever. Move on. And that mentality, I think, is something I've personally tried to implement at home, that like,
Mhm.
yeah, I do have specific deer I like to chase. I just like to play that game, find a big buck, try to track them down. I think it's just fun. But I also fully realize that's not my deer. I don't own him. And, he's on public land running around, and he's probably going to get shot by some guy with a crossbow that just started hunting last weekend. You just got to be able to roll with the punches. That's deer hunting. And especially, when you don't have full control of who's on the land you're hunting, you just gotta expect that stuff. So
Absolutely.
Yeah, I love it, man. I think I think mentality is one of the most slept on traits a bow hunter can have.
I would agree 100%. And I think that, and I hope people listen to this understand that. And like this isn't like anybody pounding their chest or anything along those lines. It's a simple process, of changing a behavior that you may have had for a long point in your life. And if you have the mentality that you're going to do well, you're going to change things about what you're going to do, and you're going to be successful, you're going to put yourself in a much more positive mind space. And that alone is what can be super helpful in sitting that extra 30 minutes in the stand, or going and scouting a little bit over the next ridge to see what's out there for you. If you are of the mindset of like, well, probably not going to see anything today, well, you're also probably going to get down earlier. You're also probably not going to go check out those oaks over there. Like you're going to lead yourself into a pattern of behaviors that's not great and not conducive. And you'll still kill deer, but is it what you want? I've made no bones about it. I said on the first episode, I'm lazy, like flat out. I know this about myself. I will like take the easy way out if presented, and it is hard for me not to sometimes. But this year I really challenged myself, and I'm like, I'm going to do all these things different. It was my first year saddle hunting. And I went out with Chris. I shot a deer out of a saddle in my first sit, and I was like, oh, this is not that bad. It's, I did something very different than what I'm used to. I saw deer every sit. I saw two bucks in Ohio when I on a 4-day trip. Had they, had a limb not been in the way, I'd probably have one of them right now. Or had it not been a pouring monsoon for 2 days out of that trip, I might have had it. I might have had a shot. But I look at that as the mentality I went into it was, I've got 4 days to get this done, and I scouted my ass off. I made sure I went and looked at these places. And when I left the cabin on the pouring rain day, my dad, my uncle, my brother go, "What the hell are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm gonna go sit. Like I got 2 more days left on this trip, and if it's raining, deer are gonna move in the rain." And sure enough, saw the most movement out of any day that I was on that trip. And it was simple as, I want to try this different. And if people are willing to accept that you can do that, then 9 times out of 10 you're going to have some form of a positive result. And you just gotta believe that it's there for the taking.
Right. No, it's a lot of really good points, and the keeping a open mind, I think, is extremely important. And then also just remembering why you're doing it. Like if you get on that day 3, day 4 of that trip, or even like just well into season, and you start feeling like it's a chore that you got to go sit, like, oh, I got to go again, or it's going to be cold. And it's like, I think sometimes you just got to step back and you're like, how are you going to feel in April when you haven't been hunting for 4 months, and all you're thinking about is velvet bucks in the summer and how excited you're going to be to hunt that early season. Like, got to remember why you're doing it, and everybody loves conservation, that's bow hunting and that, all that. But, it's also just like, it's a passion sport, man. It's, you're out there to do what you love and take advantage of that. Don't let some deer that doesn't even know who the hell you are ruin your attitude on the sport, you know? And
Absolutely, man.
It's all encompassing, really.
Absolutely. Well, any other knowledge that you want to impart to our audience this evening, Cory?
I don't know if I got any knowledge, Rick, but yeah, I mean, I don't know that I got more knowledge, but I could tell you a couple stories, some deer stories of this year.
Absolutely.
That, Wisconsin, I shot the smallest buck in recent memory that I've shot. After I shot the biggest buck I've ever shot, all in the same month span. Wisconsin, I went out there for the first time ever. And that was extremely eye-opening, massive hill country terrain, which was sweet. Loved it. Tons of sportsmen out there, guys duck hunting everywhere. You go to the gas station, they got hunter signs, stuff that I'm not used to back in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't see that anywhere. So it was beautiful country, but that was a similar story to what you talked about. It was humbling. We got out there and immediately, it's supposed to have perfect weather. It's the rut, peak of the rut, and it just poured rain for 3 straight days. And I went out there with Michael. Michael Carr was filming with us,
yeah.
and poor Michael. Like he's got this beautiful, nice camera, and we're out there trying to scout, and just like borderline, tornado downpour, and it absolutely sucked. But it's like some of the best memories I'll ever have. Running around and just kind of coming back to why you're doing it. Like that deer, I ended up shooting a buck on the last day of the trip. It took us a while, found some good sign, did all that, and super small buck. But I think that borderline was probably the best memory of the year for me, even better than Kansas. Just because I spent so much time in camp with Alex, D-Rock, Michael. We hung out. We're in this whole new place. Wisconsin's just freaking beautiful. Alex has integrated himself with the locals out there. We got to go to dinner with these people that, have houses bigger than I could ever dream of living in. And it was just fun. And I think all said and done, like one thing I think I learned this year that is more important to me than I thought was going to be is like, I want to shoot as many big bucks as anyone. But at the end of the day, the number one thing I want is to be able to look back when I'm 65 years old and think of every trip, I was fortunate enough to go spend time with my buddies on, forget about all the worries in the world of work, forget about all the worries of relationships, everything, and just like have fun in the woods doing something I love and sharing it with people that you love to do it with.
Mm-hmm.
That was very, very eye-opening this year of like, sometimes you just gotta take a step back and remember why you're a hunter, so that was cool.
I appreciate it, man. That's awesome. I love that. I love that. And like those type of trips are the best trips. When it's just weather's terrible, like everything that can go wrong does go wrong, but you just have the best time imaginable no matter what.
Right.
So,
right.
Well, Cory, tell people where they can find you and find you guys online, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. I'm on Instagram, Cory Godar. Latitude Outdoors is, our hunting brand, and you can find all our gear, social posts there. The YouTube channel has a lot of the gear videos, also has the Grit series on it. So if you want to watch that, that's on YouTube. The new Grit season 3 will be coming out end of summer here. We'll have all these hunts we're talking about on there, and that's about it, man. If you need any hunting gear, latitudeoutdoors.com. That's where you can find our stuff. And other than that, keep listening to the Mobile Hunter podcast. I learned a lot from this and really enjoy what you guys are doing with it, man.
I appreciate it, man. I appreciate it. And I again, like I'm really appreciative of you coming on here tonight and having this conversation with me. I think it's a conversation that a lot of people need to hear, and I hope if you're listening that you've taken some information from this and it helps you scout, hunt, and be a better buddy in the long run. So with that, this has been the Mobile Hunter Podcast, the Psyche of a Hunter series. My name's Rick Cates. I've been your host, and tonight I've been joined by Cory Godar of Latitude Outdoors. Cory, thanks for coming by this evening.
Appreciate it, Rick. It was a lot of fun.